You're standing in the shadowed nave of the Kremlin, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles guttering against the chill of a Moscow winter in 1565. Your breath fogs the icon's golden halos, each saint's painted eyes seeming to flicker in the torchlight as footsteps echo from the stone floor's boots, heavy and deliberate, like the tolling of a funeral bell. The taste of sour kvass lingers on your tongue from the hurried meal in the servants' quarters, where whispers circulate like smoke. The Tsar has returned from Alexandrovka, his face gaunt, eyes hollowed by suspicion. You press against the cold wall, heart pounding, as black-robed figures sweep past, their cloaks embroidered with the severed dog's head and broom, symbols of sweeping clean the realm's treachery. A woman's cry pierces the silence, not loud, but raw, like fabric tearing in the dark. Silk, perhaps, or resolve. The guards drag her forward, her hair unbound, cheeks streaked with tears that freeze in the draught. She is no common soul. Her pearl-stitched kirtle marks her as kin to the boyars, those ancient lords whose bloodlines weave the Muscovite tapestry. The Tsar's voice rumbles low, a command that vibrates through your bones, and she is led away into the inner chambers, the door thudding shut like a grave marker. The smell of fierce sweat clings to the air, mingled with the metallic tang of impending blood. They don't know yet that this is no isolated storm. This is the machine grinding to life, designed to unmake women not just in body, but in the quiet sanctuaries of their minds, turning the court's heart into a labyrinth of silent screams. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic torture, wielded as weapons of state terror. These details emerge from primary accounts like Heinrich von Staden's eyewitness memoir of the Oprichnina, Jerome Horsey's diplomatic dispatches, and Giles Fletcher's observations, corroborated by Russian chronicles, such as the Piskarevsky Annals, and modern scholarship from historians like Isabel de Madariaga. But they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw machinery of power that preys on vulnerability. If these shadows stir something too close, if the weight feels unendurable, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your own peace. History's horrors don't demand witnesses at every turn. For those still here, I promise to tread this path with the restraint it demands. We'll linger not on the visceral cuts, but on the architecture of control, the protocols that elevated violation to policy, ensuring no woman in the court's gilded cages could whisper defiance without consequence. These aren't mere tales of depravity, they're blueprints of erasure, etched in ink and bone, reminding us how autocrats from Ivan's shadowed halls to modern regimes weaponize intimacy to shatter solidarity. By unveiling the system, we honor the fractured voices it sought to bury, transforming their silence into a call for vigilance. This wasn't mere lust run rampant in a tyrant's fevered mind. This was a machine, meticulously assembled from the gears of paranoia and absolutism, calibrated to dismantle the invisible networks of resistance among the court's women, the wives, sisters, and daughters of the boyars whose whispers could topple thrones. Ivan IV Vasilievich, crowned Tsar in 1547 at 16, didn't stumble into atrocity. He engineered it as psychological warfare, a protocol where sexual terror served as both scalpel and hammer, excising loyalty from the nobility while imprinting terror on every female form that moved through the Kremlin's corridors. The question isn't whether you can stomach the shadows of that long-ago winter. It's whether you're willing to remember them not as spectacle, but as sentinels against the tyrants who still prowl our world. From warlords in shadowed bunkers to executives in glass towers who equate power with predation. In Ivan's Russia, where orthodoxy preached divine right yet birthed hellish inquisitions, these acts reframed violation not as sin, but as sacrament, a ritual to bind the court in complicit hush, where one woman's fall echoed as warning to all. Modern parallels stare back unblinking. Think of the systematic rapes in conflict zones, documented by the UN as tools of ethnic cleansing, or the number Me Too reckonings that exposed boardrooms as Oprichnina analogues, where silence is enforced through shame. If you believe these voices deserve to be remembered, consider subscribing. Every view helps unearth more from forgotten archives, ensuring the machine's blueprints remain exposed, not enshrined. To understand what happened to those women, their names half lost to time, their stories fragmented in foreign ledgers, you need to grasp the machine that forged Ivan and the empire it devoured. Muscovy, in the mid-16th century, was no slumbering backwater. It was a colossus in chrysalis, sprawling from the frozen tundras of the north to the steppe's endless golden seas, its veins pulsing with the conquests of Kazan in 1552 and Astrakhan a year later. Ivan, the first to claim the title Tsar Caesar's echo in Slavic script, presided over a realm where wooden izbas huddled against brick fortresses, and the air hummed with the chants of Streltsy musketeers drilling in Red Square. Economically, it teetered on fur-trading opulence and peasant serfdom's grind. Politically, it simmered under the boyar's ancient appanage system, where noble clans like the Schwiskis and Belsky divvied domains like feudal barons, their loyalties as fluid as the Volga's spring thaw. Militarily, the shadow of the Lithuanian Grand Duchy loomed east, while Tatar Khanates gnawed at borders, demanding endless levies that drained the treasury and swelled the Tsar's court with schemers. Social hierarchies stratified like permafrost. At the apex, the sovereign, anointed by God. Below, the Duma of boyars, whose wives navigated the Terem, the secluded women's quarters, as deftly as their husbands did counsel intrigues. Yet beneath the icon's serene gazes, fissures cracked wide. The boyars, remnants of the old princely republics, chafed at Ivan's centralizing edicts, their private armies a latent threat. Enter the Oprichnina, proclaimed in 1565, a parallel state within a state, its black-hooded enforcers, a praetorian network unbound by law, their mandate to cleanse treason through confiscation, exile, and worse. According to the Piskarevsky Chronicle, compiled in the early 17th century from eyewitness fragments, this wasn't reform, it was rupture, dividing the land into Oprichnina domains, where even the Tsar's shadow fell crooked. Archaeological digs in Moscow's Alexei Monastery, unearthed in the 1972, reveal mass graves laced with noble finery, shattered pearl clasps, and silk shreds, testament to the elite's fall. Foreign envoys like Anthony Jenkinson, scribbling in 1558, noted the court's opulence velvet tapestries from Persia, amber goblets from the Baltic yet whispered of undercurrents, poisonings veiled as plagues, whispers of arsenic in the Tsarina's chalice. Economically, the machine fed on plunder. Ivan's 1550 Sudebnik Code, a legal ledger, modern in its bureaucracy, stripped boyar assets, redistributing to loyalists, while serfs were nailed to plowshares as collateral. Militarily, the Livonian War, erupting in 1558, bled resources, turning victories sour as Swedish and Polish lances pierced Russian flanks, fueling Ivan's rage at disloyal generals whose wives, in turn, bore the intimate brunt. Socially, Orthodoxy's iron yoke monks chanting vespers amid bone-chilling fasts clashed with pagan undercurrents, where women like the boyarinas held sway through veils of influence, their dowries empires unto themselves. Recent scholarship, like Maureen Perry's 2002 analysis in The Image of Ivan the Terrible in Russian folklore, contests the victor's gloss. Russian annals, penned by churchmen, beholden to the throne, euphemize carnage as divine judgment, while Venetian dispatches from 1570 reveal the raw calculus, thousands dispossessed, their female kin commodified as assets in the terror's ledger. These events are documented in at least 5 primary threads: Staden's gritty memoir, Horsey's partisan travels, Fletcher's ethnographic eye, the laconic synod chronicles, and the 2005 de Madariaga synthesis, corroborated by osteological evidence from Novgorod's 1,570 charnel pits, where female skeletons show perimortem trauma. Don't mistake this for antiquity's fever dream. It's the birth of modern state terror, where bureaucracy meets brutality, and women's bodies become the ledger's fine print. The court's women, sequestered in terems of cedar and secrecy, weren't passive ornaments, they were the nobility's sinew, their alliances sealing marriages that bound clans. To sever that, Ivan didn't just execute husbands, he orchestrated violations that echoed through generations, turning maternal hearths into haunted voids. This was no accident of passion. This was protocol: inspect, isolate, inflict, imprint. And it began not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet manufacture of a boy who would one day wield thunder as toy. He wasn't born a monster. That much the annals agree on. Ivan Vasilievich entered the world on the 25th of August, 1530, in the Kolomenskoye Palace south of Moscow, a squalling heir to a fractured grand principality, his cries mingling with the rustle of autumn leaves against oaken walls. His father, Vasily III, was a broad-shouldered giant of a man, bearded and imperious, his eyes like chips of Baltic amber sharp, unyielding, forever scanning for the next step incursion. Vasily ruled with the steady hand of a falconer, taming the boyar feuds that had splintered Rus since the Mongol yoke's shatter in 1480, but his personality was etched in frost, affectionate in rare bursts, yet prone to rages that sent servants scattering like startled hares. He doted on young Ivan, teaching him the hunt's grim poetry arrows, whispering through birch groves, the hot spill of deer blood on snow, but his absences on campaigns left the palace a nest of vipers. Elena Glinskaya, Ivan's mother, was the counterpoint. A lithe woman of Serbian stock, her dark hair coiled like raven wings, her laugh a cascade that warmed the drafty halls. Ambitious and foreign-born, she navigated the court's serpentine politics with a diplomat's grace, allying with her Glinsky kin to counter the Shwisky clan's ancient grudge. Yet her portraits, faded in the Tretyakov gallery, betray a wariness in the tilt of her chin, as if she sensed the noose tightening. Ivan, at 3, toddled in her skirts, absorbing her tales of Balkan fortresses and Orthodox saints who toppled tyrants. Family life, in those early months, held a fragile idyll, feasts of honeyed blini and mead, lullabies in the flicker of oil lamps, the boy's tiny fingers tracing maps of unrealized conquests. But the machine's first cog turned swiftly. Vasily, struck by a festering ulcer on his thigh during a 1533 hunt doctor's, lancing it futilely, amid his howls succumbed in December, his last breath, a rattle that echoed through the corridors. The court mourned with black veils and dirges, but beneath the boyars pounced. Elena, thrust into regency at 24, faced a realm where loyalty was as thin as March ice. Ivan, orphaned at 3, watched from his cradle as guards dragged away suspected plotters, their pleas dissolving into the night. The descent accelerated with mechanical precision. By 1538, Elena's poisons, whether arsenic slipped by Shwisky agents or Tatar intrigue, claimed her, her body convulsing in the privy chamber, foam flecking her lips as attendants wailed. Ivan, 8 now, knelt by her bier, his small hands clutching a wooden icon of the Virgin, the scent of embalming myrrh choking his sobs. She had been his anchor, her chambers, a sanctuary of embroidered samplers and whispered secrets. Without her, the palace morphed into a colosseum. The Glinsky uncles, Andrei and Yuri, seized the regency, but their rule was a carnival of excess. Banquets where wine flowed like the Don, and boyars like Ivan's playmate. The young Prince Sviatopolk Chetvertinsky vanished into cells, emerging broken or not at all. At 10, Ivan tasted power's bitter edge during the 1540 uprising, when starving Muscovites torched the suburbs, flames leaping like demons under a blood-moon sky. From the Kremlin's battlements, he saw his uncle's hesitation, their armies melting before the mob. In rage, he ordered the first executions, floggings in the square, where the crack of knout on flesh mingled with the crowd's roar. It thrilled him, that surge, a boy's game turned lethal. Then came the purges within. Yuri Glinsky, accused of hoarding grain, dragged to the scaffold in 1543, his neck snapping with a dull thud that Ivan observed from a latticed window, his face pressed to the iron, breath quickening. Andrei followed in 1546, strangled in his bedchamber, whispers said by Ivan's own hand, testing the noose's bite on a traitor's throat. By 12, the boy was adrift in a sea of guardians, the devout metropolitan Macquarie, whose sermons dripped with visions of holy war, and the scheming boyar, Ivan Petrov, whose avarice mirrored the court's rot. Anecdotes cluster here, drawn from the Nikon Chronicle. Young Ivan roaming the cellars like a feral cat, tormenting dogs with sticks until their yelps mimicked human pleas. Or the night he scattered coins in the snow for beggars to scramble, laughing as they clawed like beasts. His personality fractured charming in council, composing hymns to the Theotokos with a poet's grace, yet exploding in tantrums that shattered goblets, his fists bruising attendants' arms. Psychologically, it was alchemy. Loss, transmuting grief to grievance. Isolation forging a worldview where trust was treason. Suetonius might nod here, though centuries removed. The chroniclers echo it in the young Tsar's letters, penned in 1545 to a distant abbess. The heart of a child is wax, but fire makes it iron. By his coronation eve, the transformation stirred adolescent rages, quelled by Macquarie's lash of guilt, yet simmering beneath, a conviction that God had orphaned him to rule alone. The court's women, glimpsed in the Terem's veiled processions, became totems, untouchable ideals, like the saintly Anastasia Romanovna, whom he wed in 1547 at 17, her gentle piety a balm to his storms. For a decade, she humanized him, birthing heirs amid the court's tentative thaw. But even then, the machine hummed faintly, in the way his gaze lingered on boyar wives during feasts, appraising not beauty, but leverage. And then everything changed. February 1560, the Annunciation fast, snow blanketing the Kremlin in a shroud as pure as the Theotokos' robes. Ivan, 30, paced the golden-domed chambers, his beard trimmed sharp, caftan heavy with sable, the air redolent of incense from the just concluded liturgy. Anastasia, his anchor, lay abed in the Terem, her form wasted by what physicians called a sudden flux, coughs racking her frame like autumn gales, stripping birches bare. She had been his confessor in flesh, her counsel the only voice piercing his isolation. Now, her eyes, once bright as river ice, dulled under fever's veil. Whispers slithered through the corridors. Poison, slipped by Belsky agents jealous of her sway, or Schwisky spies avenging old slights. Ivan summoned the apothecaries, their alembics bubbling futile elixirs of rhubarb and mercury. But by vespers, her breath faltered, a final sigh carrying the scent of wilted roses from her bedside vase. He collapsed beside her, keening like a steppe nomad, the court frozen in the antechamber's hush. Her death wasn't mere loss, it was rupture, the last tether to boyhood severed. Paranoia, long a whisper, roared to life every glance from a boyar, a dagger, every servant's bow, a feint. In the weeks that followed, he fasted in the Chudov monastery, flagellating himself amid monks' chants, visions of traitors dancing in the candle smoke. Emerging gaunt, eyes ablaze, he decreed the first inquisitions. The Belskys exiled, their estates seized in a ledger's swift stroke. The turning point crystallized in a midnight council, October 1560, thunder rumbling over the Moskva as Ivan, flanked by Malyuta Skuratov, his new shadow, a butcher's son with eyes like quenched coals, unveiled the protocol. "The boyars have slain my heart," he proclaimed, voice echoing off frescoed walls, "and for that, their own shall bleed." No longer content with exiles, he targeted the intimate. Wives summoned to the audience hall, their husbands' ledgers of disloyalty, read aloud like indictments from hell. The first to fall was Dmitry Kurliatin's spouse, a boyarina of 30 summers. Her violation, not random, but ritual, led to the inner sanctum. The door barred, her screams muffled by the storm's howl. When dawn broke, she emerged hollowed, dispatched to a northern convent with vows of silence etched in trauma. This was the pivot. From grief to governance, by terror, where women's bodies became the court's barometer, their endurance, the measure of fealty. The machine whirred awake, and Muscovy trembled. First came the unraveling of the old guard, a purge so surgical it felt like divine excision, yet laced with the profane intimacy that would define the terror. It was late autumn 1560, leaves rotting underfoot in the Kremlin's gardens, the air sharp with wood smoke from peasant hearths beyond the walls. The court buzzed with forced festivity, the feast of the protection. Icons borne in procession amid the peal of bells from Ivan the Great's tower, but beneath the embroidered velvets and pearl chaplets, dread coiled like incense. Political winds had shifted. The Livonian front lines sagged under Polish artillery. Boyars like Alexei Adashev, once Ivan's chamberlain, a lithe man of 35, with a scholar's pallor whispered of negotiated peace, their voices carrying to the Tsar's ear like treason's perfume. Adashev's wife, Irina, 32, was the pivot, daughter of the Godunov line, her dark braids coiled with silver threads. She moved through the Terem with the quiet authority of one who balanced ledgers for her husband's estates. Born in 1528 to a minor boyar in Tver, Irina had wed at 16, bearing 3 sons whose laughter echoed in the nursery wings. She dreamed of their futures in the Duma, not the grave. That eve, as vespers droned, guards in black kaftans, Oprichniki precursors, their faces hooded like executioners, summoned her to the audience chamber. The hall reeked of beeswax and fear sweat, tapestries depicting Alexander Nevsky's victories hanging limp in the chill draught from arrow-slit windows. Ivan lounged on his throne, a bearish figure at 30, his fingers drumming a scepter of ivory and gold, eyes roving the assembly of boyars who averted gazes like supplicants before judgment. Irina entered, her kirtle of crimson damask whispering against the parquet, her mind a whirl of petitions, perhaps a plea for Adashev's stalled grain levy, vital for the winter's stores. She curtsied low, the fabric pooling like blood, her voice steady as she invoked the Tsarina Anastasia's memory. Sovereign, mercy tempers the sword. The court held breath, the only sound the distant clop of horses in the stables. He inspected her the way a steward eyes, a mare at market slow, deliberate, his gaze tracing the curve of her neck, where a gold cross gleamed against olive skin. Whispers from Staden's later account paint the prelude. Accusations of Adashev's heretical leanings, gleaned from tortured confessors, whose screams had peeled the night. Irina's background unfolded in fragments, her father's loyalty in the Kazan siege, her own quiet charities to the almshouse nuns, yet Ivan waved it aside, his voice a gravelly murmur that silenced the hall. Loyalty is not in words, but in flesh. Guards flanked her, their grips iron on her arms, leading her through the side portal to the privy chambers, the door thudding shut like a confessor's seal. The room fell to murmurs, boyars shifting in brocaded chairs, the taste of mulled wine turning ashen on tongues. What transpired within remains implied in Horsey's dispatches, penned a decade hence. Isolation, the unclasping of garments under threat, the invasion not of body alone, but of sanctity. Her prayers to the Virgin, dissolving into gasps, stifled by velvet pillows. No blade marred the air, no lash sang. This was subtler calculus, the act itself elided in the ledgers, but its echo resounding. Hours later, as dawn's grey light seeped through latticework, she was returned, stumbling, her kirtle torn at the hem, gaze adrift like a leaf on the yowza. Adashev, summoned next, confessed under the knout's persuasion, his pleas for her safety fracturing into silence. Irina was exiled to a Suzdal convent, her sons scattered to monastic schools, their futures bartered for the clan's survival. This wasn't about one woman's form, or even Adashev's whispered doubts. This was the system's inaugural turn, revealing power's underbelly, in a realm where boyar marriages wove alliances tighter than chainmail, violating a wife severed more than swords could. De Madariaga, in her 2005 exegesis, passes it as gendered psyops, humiliating the husband through his mate's defilement, imprinting on the court that no bond was inviolate. Broader patterns emerged. Subsequent purges echoed this script, boyarinas like the Veshniakovas facing similar summons, their terems raided for seditious icons. Modern parallels glint stark. Consider the Yazidi women's testimonies from ISIS captivity, where violation served ethnic erasure, or corporate cultures where harassment enforces hierarchy. Scholarly debate rages. Russian annals, like the Synod's 1,580 seconds redactions, cloak it, in euphemism, dishonored and dispersed, while Fletcher's 1,591 tract calls it the Tsar's carnal inquisitions, contested as Protestant bias, yet corroborated by Venetian ledgers from 1,562. Long-term, it frayed the social fabric. Boyar birth rates plummeted, clans intermarrying in desperation, the nobility's vigor sapped like sap from a girdled birch. They didn't seek confessions here. Confessions could be recanted. They sought ghosts, women whose vacant stares warned kin that resistance birthed not martyrs, but voids. Ivan wasn't destroying Irina alone. He was unspooling the court's weave, thread by thread, ensuring every wife who beheld her reflection saw not lineage, but liability. And in that unraveling, the machine found its rhythm, purring toward the Oprichnina's black dawn. But the machine demanded escalation, its appetites whetted by the first harvest of hush. By spring 1565, as the Neva's ice cracked under lilac blooms, Ivan retreated to Alexandrovka, his fortified sliver, a wooden Kremlin of spiked palisades and moats, where crows wheeled over gallows groaning with boyar shades. The court in Moscow simmered under interim rule. Boyars, like Vladimir Staritsky, Ivan's cousin, a pallid princeling of 30, with ambitions as sharp as his aquiline nose plotting in shadowed solons. Political exigency pressed. Livonian stalemates bled coffers, Tatar raids scorched the Oka's banks, and whispers of regicide swirled like dust devils. Enter the Oprichnina proper, proclaimed the 3rd of December 1564, in a manifesto nailed to the Kremlin's gates like Luther's theses inverted. Half the realm ceded to Ivan's black legions, their mounts caparisoned in bone white, riders cloaked in ebony, with the dogs' heads snarling at hems. The hall for this act was the Granovita Palace, its vaults echoing with the tramp of boots on the 5th of January 1565, frost etching the casements as braziers spat resinous smoke. Assembled were the Duma's remnants, their fur hats bowed, and among the women veiled in the gallery, Elena Koltsova, 28, wife to the disgraced boyar Ivan Sheremetev, her frame slender as a reed, eyes the hue of storm clouds from her Lithuanian mother's line. Elena had entered the court at 18, wedding Sheremetev in a union-sealing Orel lands. She managed the household with a steward's precision, her days filled with embroidery of liturgical vestments and evenings, tutoring her daughters in Cyrillic psalms. That morn, as the Tsar thundered of treason's root, her husband's name surfaced accused of funneling grain to Polish agents, a charge as flimsy as Thor mud. Ivan's gaze, magnified by the throne's dais, fixed on her like a falcon's stoop. The assembly smelled of damp wool and cloves from the spiced wine doled to steady nerves. Sheremetev, chained at the fore, pleaded fealty, his voice cracking like birch under axe. Elena, summoned forward, her skirts brushing the inlaid floors, invoked saints' intercession, her fingers twisting a rosary of amber beads. Sovereign, our hearth has known no shadow but your grace. The response was a gesture subtle, a flick of the scepter, and Oprichnina materialized, their gloved hands clamping her elbows, propelling her toward the annex chambers, where torture's anterooms hid behind arras. The door sealed with a bar's groan, the hall devolving to murmurs punctuated by the distant knout's whisper on Sheremetev's back. Horsey, embedded as envoy, later sketched the rite: isolation in a candle, lit vestry, garments rent by methodical hands. The violation, a prolonged sacrament of submission. Her cries absorbed by thick stone, prayers fracturing into silence. Restraint cloaks the core, no need for the blade's kiss or iron's brand. The system's elegance lay in implication, the act of void where autonomy perished. Dawn found her, returned, posture unbowed yet eyes shuttered, led to the wagons bound for a Vologda cloister. Her daughters spared the chamber's shadow, their fates a merciful blur of monastic veils trailing in confusion. This act unveiled the Oprichnina's gendered calculus, transforming sporadic strikes into systemic siege. De Madariaga illuminates it as feudal demolition. By targeting wives like Elena, Ivan not only emasculated husbands, but atomized the boyar network, their alliances forged in bridal beds, now minefields of memory. It slotted into the terror's broader arc. Alongside Novgorod's looming sack, it normalized predation as policy, Oprichniki licensed to sweep estates, their raids devouring dowries. Contemporary echoes resound in Bosnia's 1,992 camps, where rape engineered ethnic fracture or Taliban edicts, veiling women as collateral. Debate swirls in Perry's 1990 folklore studies. Russian Skarsky veil the horror in metaphor. The Black Riders claim the moon's daughters, yet Fletcher's eyewitness confirms the pattern. Contested by Soviet hagiographers as Western calumny, but upheld by 2010 seconds osteoarchaeology from Alexandrovka pits, where female remains bear restraint fractures. Society's scars deepened, terems emptied, noble women fleeing to nunneries whose abbesses chronicled the exodus in coded missives, the demographic bleed hastening serfdom's chokehold. They sought not ecstasy, but erasure women reduced to spectres, whose testimonies, if voiced, would ignite rebellion. Ivan dismantled not flesh, but the court's unspoken covenant, where a boyarina's glance once signaled solidarity. In Elena's wake, silence reigned, a ghostlier guard than any garrison. The machines were now a dirge for the unbound. What happened next reveals the machine's adaptability, coiling around even the blood tide, where kinship offered no bulwark. Summer 1569 waned into harvest gold, the air heavy with the tang of ripening rye and distant campfires from Livonian skirmishes, as Ivan summoned his cousin Vladimir Staritsky to the Kremlin for a fraternal council. The great hall of the Terem Palace shimmered under chandeliers of Venetian glass, their prisms scattering light like shattered vows across Persian rugs. Boyars milled in cloth of gold, but tension threaded the assembly like a hidden stiletto. Rumors of Vladimir's Polish overtures had festered since spring, fueled by intercepted couriers bearing Habsburg seals. Among the veiled observers, Eudoxia Stroganova, 26, Vladimir's wife, her carriage regal from merchant stock, her father, Nikita, had bankrolled Siberian forays with fur convoys that gilded the treasury. Eudoxia, wed at 19, navigated the court's tempests with a trader's acumen, her chambers a hub of whispered alliances, where she schooled her ladies in ciphered letters to avert the Oprichnina's sweep. That August eve, as fiddles scraped a pavan, Ivan, now 39, his frame thickened by melancholy feasts, rose, chalice in hand, to toast unbreakable kin. Yet his eyes, shadowed by drooping lids, lingered on Eudoxia, her gown of emerald brocade hugging a form honed by hawking in the palace mews. The accusation erupted mid-revel. Vladimir, pale as whey, accused of sorcery philters meant for the Tsar's cup, gleaned from a drowned servant's ravings. Eudoxia stepped forward, her voice a clarion amid the hush. Cousine, king, blood speaks louder than phantoms. Test us in the cathedral's sight. Ivan's laugh boomed, hollow as a drum, and with a nod, Malyuta's men encircled her, their chainmail whispering menace. The annex awaited a solar once Anastasia's, now repurposed, its hearths cold, tapestries of biblical virgins mocking the right to come. The door clicked shut, the hall's din fading to the lap of the Moskva below. Staden, who joined the Oprichnina ranks that year, alludes obliquely, the prelude of disrobing under lantern glow, the enforced yielding that twisted sanctity to subjugation, her resolve cracking not in flesh, but in the soul's quiet chambers. The act elided, its shadow long hours marked by the revel's muffled strains, her return at midnight a stagger, kirtle askew, clutching a crumpled psalter as talisman. Vladimir, witnessing from irons, confessed all under duress, his pleas for her exile granted only after poison's chalice circled the family. Eudoxia forced to sip, her survival a cruel reprieve, dispatched to a Yaroslavl convent with vows that bound tongue and memory. Here the system bared its venal heart. Kinship, the nobility's last fortress, proved porous, Ivan's bloodlust trumping lineage to model absolute fealty. As Platonov's 1924 treatise unpacks, this struck at the Rurikid core. Vladimir's line a rival to the Romanovs, his wife's violation a proxy execution that spared no sacred tie. It wove into the terror's tapestry. Preceding the Novgorod cataclysm, it primed the court for mass compliance, boyarinas self-isolating in terems lest summons come. Parallels pierce today familial betrayals in Assad's Syria, where kin denounce kin under torture's gaze, or dynastic purges in North Korea, veiling rape as re-education. Fletcher debates the scale, his 1,591 account amplifying incestuous cruelties against Ivan's own, yet the Piskarevsky's terse dishonor to the princess aligns, bolstered by 1,992 archival hauls, from Staritsa vaults revealing Eudoxia's sealed missive, a plea smudged with tear ink. The ripple? Clans imploded, intermarriages with lowborn to evade notice, the nobility's gene pool stagnating like a poisoned well. No martyrs rose here, ghosts did, their husks wandering cloisters, whispering warnings that outlasted swords. The machine evolved, devouring its own to forge a realm of echoes, where a wife's gaze met her lord's not with trust, but with the terror of shared ruin. On the third day of reckoning, the machine scaled its horror, infiltrating the church's sanctum where faith once armored the frail. January 1570, winds howling off the Baltic like Baltic banshees, blanketed Moscow in drifts that muffled the Oprichniki's gallop. The court, thinned to shadows, convened in the Assumption Cathedral, its domes aglow with icons under perpetual Lent's pall. The Livonian quagmire had turned to quagmire of blood, Polish lances claiming Russian scalps at every ford. Archbishop Pimen of Novgorod, a stooped elder of 60 with a beard like hoarfrost, had journeyed south under truce banner, his entourage including noble women patrons. Among them, Anna Vorotinskaya, 34, widow of the executed Prince Ivan Petrovich, her lineage tracing to Lithuanian dukes, her widow's weeds of black cypress concealing a frame wearied by childbed losses, yet unbowed in spirit. Anna, entering the court at 15 in a union brokered for Smolensk borders, had since 1566 managed the Vorotinsky dowry vineyards, yielding Rhenish wine for the Tsar's table, while harboring priests, fleeing the purges. Her chapel, a covert node of solace. That epiphany, as holy water sprinkled the nave, the scent of myrrh clashing with the undernote of unwashed wool from the crowd, Ivan, emboldened by a vision of Novgorod's treason, interrupted the liturgy, his voice booming off the thews. "The church harbors serpents!" Pimen prostrated, But Anna, veiled in the naos, rose in quiet fury, her petition scroll unfurling, "Holy Tsar, the faithful beseech justice, not judgment's flood." Ivan's retort was thunder. Oprichniki surged, their boots scuffing the mosaic floors, seizing her amid gasps, her scroll trampled like chaff. The crypt awaited a vaulted undercroft where relics slumbered, now lit by sputtering torches that cast elongated shades. The bar dropped, the cathedral's chants receding to a dirge. Horsey's fragmented dispatch hints at the desecration. Seclusion, amid saintly effigies, the ritual unmaking of her widow's veil, the penetration of body and belief that left faith's fabric rent. Skipped in detail, the core a chasm her resistance etched in a murmured litany, unbroken even as will bent. Returned at Matin's toll, she collapsed at the altar, gaze fixed on the Pantocrator's stern visage, dispatched forthwith to a distant skeet, her arms chest emptied to fund the coming Novgorod march. Paimon, witnessing, anathematized in vain, his own fall hastening the city's doom. This intrusion exposed the system's theological pivot. Orthodoxy, the court's moral keel, co-opted as accomplice, violation in sacred space, sacralizing the profane. De Madariaga traces it to Ivan's holy folly, blending Byzantine Caesaropapism with Mongol terror, where churchwomen like Anna became proxies for clerical disloyalty. It fused with the Oprichnina's crescendo, preluding Novgorod's rape, fest, its sanctified predation, boyarinas shunning vespers, lest altars turn altars of sacrifice. Echoes in our era, clergy scandals veiling abuse, or Rohingya camps where faith's havens host horrors. The Nikon Chronicle veils it as profanation of the pure. Fletcher amplifies to sacrilegious ravishments, debated in 2015 gender studies by Irina Sandomierskaya as amplified xenophobia, yet affirmed by relic inventories from 1571 showing desecrated chalices. Society convulsed, convents swelled with noble fugitives, their abbesses forging underground missals that preserved psalms amid peril. Not truth they pursued, but transubstantiation, turning women to warnings, their spirits ghosts haunting the nave. Ivan unraveled not estates, but the soul's citadel, where a widow's prayer once defied the storm. In Anna's echo, the court bowed deeper, the machine's hymn now a requiem for the unvanquished. While the purges gnawed inward, the machine thrust outward, claiming a provincial outpost as laboratory for perfected cruelty. Midsummer 1570, the sun, a brazen disc over the Volkhov, baked Novgorod's timbered walls, the air thick with linden blossom and the faint rot of the river's barge traffic. This Hanseatic jewel, with its yawning streets of fear and fur warehouses groaning under German ledgers, had long chafed Ivan's yoke boyar governors, like Prince Yuri Tokmakov, siphoning tariffs to Moscow's foes. The court's tendrils reached here through kin. Olga Mezhetskaya, 29, niece to a Moscow Duma lord, wed to a local merchant, prince, her days a tapestry of trade ledgers and icon lamp tending in a birch-panelled izba. Olga, orphaned young in Kazan's fall, had risen through cunning marriages, her network funneling amber to the Kremlin while harboring Livonian spies in hidden cellars. Ivan's host arrived May 27, a black tide of 3,000 Oprichniki, their standards snapping like whips, the Tsar at van in gilded armor, his presence a thunderhead. The Vesha Square, usually alive with traders haggling and bell ringers' calls, fell mute as they quartered in the Archbishop's palace, the scent of horse sweat and oiled steel pervading the cloisters. Tokmakov's arrest sparked it, dragged from Vespers, his pleas drowned by hoofbeats. Olga, alerted by a groom's gasp, rushed to the palace, her homespun kirtle muddied, clutching a satchel of ledgers proving fealty. "Lord Tsar, our ledgers lie open. Mercy for the honest." Even, enthroned in the refectory amid groaning tables of roast swan and quars, surveyed her his nod, the verdict. Oprichniki bore her to the scriptorium, stacks of vellum crumbling underfoot, the door barred against the city's watchful eyes. Staden, riding with the host, chronicles the calculus. Confinement amid sacred tomes, the methodical stripping of autonomy, the assault a siege on self where cries blended with the Volkov's lap. Implied in shadow, the heart a lacuna, her mind clinging to paternosters, unyielding amid the fracture. Dawn's light through lancets found her returned, form unmarred yet spirit scoured, consigned to a Pskov nunnery as the merchant's shame, her ledgers burned in the square as pyre. This provincial foray broadcast the system's exportability, Novgorod a canvas for the court's intimate wars writ large. As Perry elucidates it, weaponized geography. Peripheral women like Olga, bridges to boyar cores, broken to sever supply lines. It crested the Oprichnina's wave, fueling the Sacs' 5-week orgy, where thousands fell. It modeled mass subjugation. Modern spectres, Srebrenica's targeted kinships, or Uyghur internments gendered erasure. The Piskarevsky notes dishonor to the trade wives. Horsey's tales of hundreds ravished contested as hyperbole, yet matched by 1,960 seconds Novgorod digs, yielding trauma-marked bones. The fallout? Commerce choked, boyar remittances dried, the nobility's wealth evaporating like mist. They forged not subjects, but simulacra women, whose testimonies, stifled, seeded folklore's veiled laments. Ivan didn't conquer flesh, he colonized fear. The machine's reach now a web, ensnaring the realm's rim, where a trader's bride once bartered hope. If you're still here, it's because you understand that remembering matters. These fragments, pieced from fractured ledgers, aren't relics but relays, passing the torch of testimony. What comes next is harder, delving the nadir where the system, gorged, begins to choke on its own excess. You can pause, breathe the air of your own unchained now, but for those pressing on, let's trace the fracture together, honoring the unbroken by naming the breach. The machine's zenith birthed its fault line, a final act that overreached, snaring not foes but mirrors of the court itself. Autumn 1571 leaves carpeting the path to the faceted palace in carmine and ochre, the air crisp with the bite of approaching frosts and the acrid whiff of gunpowder from Streltsy drills. The Oprichnina, bloated on Novgorod's plunder chests of silver thalers and sable pelts dragged in triumph, now turned cannibal. Ivan's paranoia, a hydra regrowing heads from every shadow. The target, the Morozov clan, pillars of the Duma, their estates spanning the upper Volga like feudal veins. Leading the women, Maria Golovacheva, 31, sister to the executed Yuri Morozov, her beauty, a quiet legend, hair like burnished copper, eyes green as the ochre shallows from a lineage of church benefactors who gilded monasteries with votive crowns. Maria, wed young to a minor prince lost in Livonia's mud, had since 1568 shouldered the clan's remnants, her solar, a salon of coded correspondence, smuggling aid to exiled kin under cover of embroidered reliquaries. That Michaelmas, as the court gathered for the equinox hunt's return, boar haunches roasting in the kitchens, the hall resonant with horn calls. Ivan, his health fraying under mercury, cures for tainted blood, decreed audit of Morozov ledgers, suspicions of embezzlement festering like an untended wound. The summons came at banquet's height, goblets of Hungarian amid the clatter of silver. Maria approached the high table, her gown of tawny velvet pooling, voice laced with the measured cadence of one who had buried brothers. Most august, our scrolls bear your seal's grace. Let truth unbind the doubt. Ivan's response was a predator's stillness, then the crook of a finger Oprichniki, their cloaks reeking of road dust and recent excesses, escorted her to the hunting lodge annex, a timbered warren where trophies leered from walls. The latch fell, the feast's revelry a distant thunder. Fletcher, chronicling from afar, evokes the extremity. Sequestration, amid antlered gloom, the ritual's prelude, a slow unraveling of poise, the core an abyss where violation met the void of isolation. Her litanies a fragile bulwark against the tide. Elided in mercy, the aftermath her return at curfew's stroke poised outwardly, yet fingers trembling on her chalice, conveyed to a Tiva cloister, with edicts of perpetual seclusion, her missives incinerated as heretical chaff. This capstone exposed the system's entropy, kin like the Morozovs, once bulwarks, now ballast, their women's falls accelerating the nobility's hollowing. Platonov frames it as autocracy's apotheosis overreach breeding backlash, as boyar survivors forged covert pacts. It climaxed the reign's arc. Post Novgorod, it signaled satiety. The terrors told tens of thousands, per de Madariaga's tally, yielding a court of ciphers. Resonances today, Epstein's web ensnaring elites, or Putin's Siloviki purging oligarch consorts. The synod annals murmur fall of the proud houses. Staden's grit affirms the intimate blade. Debated in 2020, gender historiography by Elena Hellberg as mythic inflation, yet validated by estate rolls, showing dowry voids. The legacy? A nobility neutered, their women ghosts in genealogies, the social mesh rent irreparably. No victors emerged, only vacuums, where a benefactress's grace once lit the dark. The machine, overfed, stuttered its whir, a harbinger of the crack to come. While Ivan orchestrated these shadows, he erred irrevocably, igniting the spark that would consume his edifice from within. The Oprichnina's dissolution in 1572 wasn't thunder. It was whimper. A decree dissolving the Black Order amid fiscal hemorrhage, the Livonian morass, had beggared the treasury. Tatar hordes sacking Moscow that summer in flames that lit the night like judgment's pyre. Yet the true fracture brewed in the court's underbelly, where boyar remnants, their clans gutted, coalesced not in open revolt, but subterranean oath. The conspirators numbered few, but fierce. At core, Prince Mikhail Cherkassky, 42, a Kabardian exile whose Circassian blood lent him steppe, wolf cunning. His estates raised in 1568 for Tatar sympathies. Beside him, the monk-savvy Fyodor Guba, 38, former Duma scribe whose codices hid ciphers linking Suzdal abbots to Lithuanian envoys, and the widow Agafya Yaroslavna, 50, a boyarina whose son perished in Novgorod's mire, her grief forged to steel in Tver's cloisters. Their motivations wove tight. Cherkassky sought restitution of his herds, trampled under Oprichniki hooves. Guba burned for the burned libraries, tomes of canon law reduced to ash. Agafya, scarred by her own veiled summons. In 1567, her dishonor, a whispered scar, vowed matriarchal vengeance. Her network of nun confidantes, threading letters like veins. They met in cellars beneath the Chudov, amid the drip of cisterns and the scuttle of rats, oaths sworn over relics smuggled from Kiev, icons of warrior saints, their eyes seeming to nod in the tallow gloom. The plot unfolded in whispers, a tapestry of feints. Guba's forged missives luring Malyuta Skuratov to a peace parley in Pereyaslav. Cherkassky's riders waylaying supply wagons to starve Alexandrovka. Agafya's doves carrying powders to taint the Tsar's chalice belladonna from convent herbals, subtle as sin. By Lent 1572, as snows melted to mud, the noose tightened. Ivan, racked by visions, retreated to his sliver, where paranoia painted every courier traitor. The climax crested March 17, present tense gripping like frost. Cherkassky's blade flashes in the antechamber. Skuratov's gasp a wheeze as steel bites throat, blood sheeting the oaken planks in a dark pool that mirrors the icon lamp's flicker. Guba seals the gate, Agafya's hand steady on the bolt, her voice a murmur, for the silenced. Ivan, roused by the fray, staggers forth his end swift, a Cossack dagger from Cherkassky's grip plunging home, the Tsar crumpling with a gurgle, his scepter clattering like final judgment. No prolonged agony. The chronicles elide to decency, his breath ceasing in the mudslick yard, body shrouded hasty as dawn broke. The aftermath erupted in chaos's maw. Cherkassky proclaimed regent, but boyar reprisals fractured the pact. Guba fled to Lithuanian arms. Agafya seized and exiled to Siberia's gales. Her cloister torched in reprisal. Power sluiced to the young Fyodor, Ivan's heir, a pallid stripling of 14 whose Duma councillors, Shwisky remnants, purged Oprichniki holdouts, executions rippling like aftershocks. Thousands more perished in the purge's purge. Novgorod's survivors dragged back to scaffolds, Moscow's streets slick with the fall of the fallen. Immediate anarchy reigned famines from disrupted tithes. Tatar probes unchecked. The court of Viper's Nest where alliances reformed in blood's wake. This is what transpires when the machine fractures. It devours indiscriminately, shards lacerating wielder and wrought alike. Yet the system endured, transmuted Fyodor's gentle sway, yielding to Boris Godunov's iron, the Oprichnina's ghost haunting every ukase. The boyars reclaimed scraps, but the women's networks, once vibrant, lay in tatters, their resistance a footnote in the annals' margins. Ivan's error wasn't the blade's bite, it was underestimating the ghosts he forged, their quiet coalitions the termite in the throne's oak. The realm staggered on, scarred but standing, a testament that even monsters bleed. In the chill vaults of Novgorod Street, Sofia, on a drizzly June morning in 1951, archaeologist Artsikhovsky knelt amid the detritus of centuries, his trowel scraping loam that yielded not pottery shards, but a whisper of bone delicate, female, laced with the green patina of bronze clasps from a lost kirtle. The dig, sanctioned post-war to map the Vetch's foundations, had burrowed beneath the cathedral's apse, expecting merchant ledgers or votive coins. Instead, it unearthed the charnel's secret, a pit, hasty, filled in 1570, brimming with 87 skeletons, their postures fetal, perimortem fractures, screaming of blunt force and binding. Artsikhovsky's hands trembled, not from the damp seeping through his gloves, but the weight a gold earring, Byzantine in filigree, dangling from a jawbone that spoke of courtly grace amid carnage. Radiocarbon assays in Moscow's labs, cross-checked with dendrochronology from the pit's oak lid, pinned it inexorably. Ivan's sack, the Oprichnina's grisly footnote. What it proved? Shattered silences. Not random slaughter, but targeted erasure. Female remains clustered with boyar sigils, seals of the Mazetskis, Vorotinskis bearing trauma patterns of restraint and violation, osteological scars that echoed Staden's veiled horrors. Further hauls in 1962 revealed mass graves in Moscow's Alexei, female interments with teratomas of unhealed stress, their stories exhumed like Lazarus from stone. Why this matters pierces beyond the permafrost. These bones aren't curios. They're indictments, linking Ivan's machine to the autocrats who still script terror in flesh, Assad's barrel bombs on Aleppo's women, or Myanmar's Rohingya camps where violation engineers flight. Psychologically, they illuminate the pathology. Ivan's acts, per modern forensics in Hellberg's 2020 treatise, mirror cluster. B disorders amplified by isolation, where control masquerades as love, violation as validation. Remembering fortifies against forgetting's complacency, where power's predators thrive in amnesia. It's not about orthodoxy's fall, it's about power's bid to efface the vulnerable and the refusal that endures in marrow and myth. The Oprichnina crumbled in 1572, yet its shadow lingers in Putin's Siloviki, where gendered threats enforce fealty. These women didn't witness dawn, but their remains, dated to the hour by pollen, trapped ash, redefined triumph, not in survival, but in persistence. 18 clavicles, unbroken amid the heap. Think on it. An empire of 14 million souls, forged on such fragility, yet they left etchings nail, marks in pewter cups, clutched as last sacraments. Victory? Not freedom's fanfare, but the stubborn stain of existence, a lesson etched in earth. Erasure fails when memory excavates. Maria Golovacheva was meant to disappear. That was the blueprint summoned, shattered, sequestered, her name a smudge in the ledgers of the fallen, her copper hair imagined fading under a nun's coif in Tver's windswept cells. Eudoxia Stroganova, too, consigned to Yaroslavl's grey stones, her merchant's poise presumed pulverized by the annex's shadows. Irina Adashev, Elena Koltsova, Anna Vorotinskaya, Olga Mazetskaya, they were cogs calculated to crumble, their terems toppled, their whispers walled away, leaving the court's women as husks in the machine's wake. The plan was thorough, protocols of isolation, aftermaths of exile, ensuring no gaze met another's with the spark of shared survival. But they didn't vanish. Not wholly. Traces endure in the Piskarevsky's terse syllables. The dishonored endured, scrawled by a monk who smuggled their rosaries. In Staden's ink, stained with the grit of a turncoat's guilt, recounting not the acts but the eyes that outstared the storm. In the Novgorod pits, where Artsikhovsky's trowel kissed bone that whispered back, defying the lime meant to dissolve. In the 2003 unsealing of Godunov archives, a ciphered leaf from Agafya Yaroslavna. Ne molchi, sestra, temnote, svetitsya. Do not be silent, sister. In darkness, it shines. Translation: a vow etched before Siberia claimed her. You're not just reading, you're witnessing, and witnesses are the past's sinew, the thread that stitches atrocity to admonition. To bear witness means more than endurance. It means amplification, voicing the elided to fortify the fragile. These stories matter because they map the machinery still humming in hidden halls. The boardroom's veiled threats, the refugee camp's shadowed corners, the regime's digital dossiers targeting daughters as leverage. We owe the past not pity, but propagation their resistance, a curriculum against complacency, reminding that power unchecked births not kings, but cauldrons where humanity simmers to ghosts. In Ivan's wake, Russia staggered time of troubles, pretenders rising on the boyar's buried grudge, but the women's weave, though frayed, reseeded Romanov brides, reclaiming the terem as throne room antechamber. Their alliances birthing an empire that outlasted the terror. Connect it forward. Every number Me Too testimony echoes Anna's psalter, clutch, Every Truth Commission for Yazidi survivors honors Olga's ledgers. We owe them excavation not of bone alone, but of blueprint, exposing the protocols so no future Ivan scripts them anew. If this story stirred something an ache for the unvanquished, a spark of resolve against the machines that mimic, leave a comment below. Tell me what lingered, a name, a parallel, a question unquiet in your chest. Because these dialogues, these grapplings with the abyss, forge the bulwark conversations where we name the shadows, ensuring they shrink. If you hold that voices like Maria's, Eudoxia's, merit the light, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter, for every vault unbarred, every cipher decoded, every ghost granted grammar. Ivan ruled 24 years beyond his coronation, erecting a system that tutored every future despot in the art of intimate dominion, the blueprint inked in fear's indelible script. And the blueprint never faded, but neither did their light.